the journos are in panic, which is so weird because their preferred candidate, they think, won, right? So what's the big deal, guys? Calm down. It's all going to be fine. Live in the now. Take a chill. Why got to be all crazy? Democrat journos, why? Why can't you just relax a little bit? Wouldn't that be better? You got so many of them now going, oh, he's never going to leave. What's going to happen? Here's John Harwood over at CNN. He's one of the anti-Trumpers that pretends to be a journo. Play 12.
Look, the president has been hunkered down in the White House, mostly watching television, reacting to television, not by any outward sense doing the job of president in this deadly pandemic, except for firing a bunch of people who had stood up to him, like Mark Esper, the former defense secretary. The president's obviously struggling psychologically to accept his defeat. While he is doing so, he is forcing the entire Republican Party to acquiesce in this charade, in part because they're trying to motivate their base for a couple of Senate elections in Georgia in January. And the question is going to be, how long can the president maintain this position? How long will Republicans stay with him?
Yeah, that's a journalist, folks. That's what he would tell you. That's the claim he'd make. Doing a little bit of on-the-fly psych-analysis there. Well, the president's psychologically struggling. The president's fine. There's nothing about what's going on right now that is outside of the rules established before this election. When I mean the challenges being brought state by state. Nothing. No part of this that should worry anyone, but you'll notice the journalists are terrified, and I think it's because they've really overpromised themselves. They thought we're going to win this election by a lot, and Trump will be repudiated. People will be ashamed of the moments that they wore MAGA hats. And not just people in the media. Fake Tapper, who is among the most thin-skinned and really, fraudulent and vile people in the mainstream media. Just ask anybody who's ever had Fake Tapper crawl into their DMs on Twitter and threaten their career. One of his favorite things to do, as if he's in a position to do that. Fake Tapper said on Twitter publicly what a lot of us know is his general mentality, which is think about how employers, during this difficult time, people should think about how employers will view the way they acted. Wait, what? It's a not subtle way of Fake Tapper at CNN telling people, now's your chance to turn on Trump. Now's your chance, especially if you're in the media. You turn on Trump now, maybe there'll be a little room for you over at CNN or one of these other places. You jump ship at this moment. Come on. We're about to storm the castle. You want to betray your side, hand over the keys, make it a little easier for us? We'll treat you nicely. We promise. What they're finding out is that everybody who has been shields high for Trump all along is standing there, gripping their battle axe, gripping their two-handed sword, their claymore, if you will, sword and then turned into a mine later. And they're saying, no, we're going to fight this one out. Metaphorically, folks, obviously, just in case the scum from Media Matters wants to clip that one out, metaphorically speaking. No, we're going to fight. We're going to fight until we are truly beaten in this battle, or until we win, obviously. And then we'll move on. Not before then. Not before then. We're not going to bend the knee didn't stop because the day after the election, not on election night, Joe Biden got a slim margin of victory in a handful of states. It didn't turn into, oh yeah, sure, we're let's all bend the knee. Okay. Let's go back to the Romney McCain version of things where we're like, gosh darn it, you guys just keep beating us and you keep inflicting your horrible policies on us and doing all these terrible things that we don't like. But as long as you say we're good losers, we're okay with that. As long as you say we're gracious in defeat. No. We'll be reasonable in defeat when we're sure we're defeated, and not before then. The libs do not like this. Here's 13.
Well, it's significant because it's not just norm breaking, but it's completely inappropriate and unpresidential and very unlike the United States of America. But I still think it's the former. I think it's the petulance. I think it's the denial. And it's the most unsurprising thing we've seen in the history of Donald Trump as president. To argue that something is rigged, not to play by the rules, to lead his supporters along. Donald Trump has a death grip over the grassroots of the Republican Party, and that didn't change in the aftermath of this election.
The last thing he said is somewhat accurate analysis. I wouldn't say death grip, but yeah, the grassroots of the GOP are still with Trump. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's such a lack of self-awareness from journalists on this issue. You have to remember, they promoted the Russia collusion hoax for 4 years now. I mean, they still will say there was something there or we just haven't found it yet, which was all just a denial of the 2016 election. And they created extra legal processes to go after the president. They abused FISA, right? They did things that should never have been done that were wrong to do. They broke process and precedent to undo the 2016 election. They were unsuccessful, but they tried. And now they're referring to our ability to use the process legitimately and honestly to verify what's happened here. And they act like that's the horrible transgression. No, sorry, we remember. They can gaslight all they want. They can play this game all day long. We remember. And we're not going to change. We're not going to back down on this one. And it's dawning on them that the exuberance, the dancing in the streets, the partying, yeah, it's all over. What's all over? You're going to have doddering old Joe Biden in the White House, maybe, trying to sign executive orders. You know what's going to happen to those executive orders when they're unconstitutional, which they certainly, some of them will be? They're going to challenge them in court, just like the libs did to Trump. And they challenge them in bad faith. I mean, they just run off knowing that some activist judge on the Ninth Circuit will give them whatever policy outcome they want until the Supreme Court overturns them. Supreme Court, that's how we know they're wrong, right? The Supreme Court keeps looking at this, and sometimes 9-0, they'll say, no, you can't. No, guys, you can't just stop him because he's Trump. Sorry. Even some of the libs on the Supreme Court would have to say, well, no, you can't do that. Yes. They're realizing right now that they've set something of a template here, haven't they? That the libs, the Democrats' refusal to accept the 2016 election and the hashtag resistance all around it, we're not going to be a bunch of lunatics like they were. We're not going to destroy things. We're not going to attack people. We don't do that. But we are going to approach it with the same tenacity that they did. We are going to take a look at what they've done until now and make them live in a country where we're going to use all of the levers of power within the system we can to our advantage as well. It's not going to be a one-way street anymore. It's going to go two ways. And that, I think, is important to remember here. Joe Biden's out there saying that Trump needs to concede, of course. Play 17.
Sir, what do you say to the Americans that are anxious over the fact that President Trump has yet to concede and what that might mean for the country?
Well, I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly. The only thing that, how can I say this tactfully? I think it will not help the president's legacy. I think that I know from my discussions with foreign leaders thus far that they are hopeful that the United States democratic institutions are viewed once again as being strong and enduring. But I think at the end of the day, it's all going to come to fruition on January 20th. And between now and then, my hope and expectation is that the American people do understand that there has been a transition.
There has not been a transition. The votes have not been certified. There are legal challenges. They're the ones that are denying process. Maybe Joe Biden won. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying that didn't happen. The president goes further than I will go right now, but he's in the fight and he's at the forefront of it. But when they say that this is already a done deal, that's not true. It is not a done deal. They can say it, they can repeat it as much as they want. It's not true. And was it un-American and terrifying when in 2000, Al Gore took it to court for weeks and weeks and weeks? Apparently said there's no need to be snippy when he told Bush that he was retracting his concession, right? You don't need to be snippy about it. I'd be pretty snippy about it. But would that be better? Would that seem more honest for Trump to concede and then go to court? Think about the pathway that they're leaving open to him. As I've been telling you, if he conceded, but then was bringing court challenges, they'd say that he's being duplicitous, and that would be undermining our system. How could he be doing this? So was it, yes or no, was it un-American, unpresidential for Al Gore to bring the legal challenges that he did, which were very straightforward? He just kept looking to have recounts done in specific counties in Florida and not statewide, and he kept cherry picking. Well, I want to recount, in Miami-Dade, but I don't want to recount in the Panhandle. I want to recount here, I don't want to recount there. No, that's not the way it's supposed to go. And then years later, it turned out Al Gore lost Florida. There was never a vote tally that could be done on legally cast ballots that put Al Gore ahead. Never happened. But you don't hear them talking about how that was so unpresidential and terrifying and un-American. And what are we going to do? What are we going to do? They can't handle it, friends. Oh, and just like how it's somehow not a violation of the Logan Act, it's a violation of the Logan Act for the incoming Trump National Security Advisor, General Flynn, to have a phone call with Sergei Kislyak. That, they'll say, is a violation of the Logan Act, even though no one really believes that. But now Biden, who's not yet even the president-elect, but claims he is having calls with foreign leaders. That seems interesting. Play 16.
Well, first of all, I'm letting them know that America's back. We're going to be back in the game. It's not American alone. Number one, I've had the opportunity to speak with now 6 world leaders, and the response has been very fulsome, energetic, and they're all looking forward to being able to, from Great Britain to France, to Germany, to Canada, et cetera, and Ireland. So I feel good about the ability to. I said when we announced that the next president is going to inherit a divided country and a world in disarray. The reception and welcome we've gotten around the world from our allies and our friends has been real. I have a number of other calls to return, and so I feel confident that we're going to be able to put America back in the place of respect that it had before.
The world in disarray? How is the world in disarray exactly? Because we haven't invaded a country we didn't need to? Is that why the world's in disarray? What exactly is Joe Biden referring to? That the world is in clearly better shape now, with the exception of COVID, which is not Trump's fault, despite all the stuff they say. Better shape now from a national security perspective during the Obama years? Rise of ISIS, collapse in Iraq, Afghanistan, the fight against the Taliban, more U.S. casualties than at any point during the Bush administration, the collapse of Libya, the toppling of Gaddafi. We had slave markets operating on the Libyan coast and mass executions by beheading of Christians, barely even getting much notice in the news as it was happening under the Obama administration because so much bad crap was going on. And we're going to talk about a world in disarray? That's delusional. But Biden's delusional. And also, based on the standards that the libs set up, we should have Logan Act investigations of everybody involved in those phone calls now, right? That's what we're supposed to do, right? That's what the Democrats did to General Flynn. Clear case. We all know it. Now, I don't think that should be done to anyone, but the point is here, they're frauds and hypocrites, and they weaponized a law that no one really believes in to go after Trump's national security advisor, and they want to talk about transitions. I recently got a crash course in home title theft, and you better pray this crime never happens to you because it can really destroy you financially. It goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys, cyber thieves, they find your home's title online. Then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, and take out loans against your home's equity. You often won't find out about this until you get payment demands in the mail, perhaps even a foreclosure notice. The usual identity theft services don't protect you from this. You need specialists to create a virtual barrier around your home's title. That's why I want you to go with Home Title Lock. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com, use the promo code RADIO to get 30 free days of protection. You can also check online to see if you're already a victim of this crime and don't even know it. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. Start today. Don't wait. This crime is growing as cybercrime all across the country rises during the pandemic. Go with Home Title Lock.
Do you believe there's widespread voter fraud, that the reports that we're getting from Pennsylvania, from Michigan, showing vote totals and massive leads or significant leads with 99% reporting are going to be overturned, and that the United States failed to conduct a fraudulent free election?
Rich, I'm the Secretary of State. I'm getting calls from all across the world. These people are watching our election. They understand that we have a legal process. They understand that this takes time, right? It took us 37 plus days in an election back in 2000. We conducted a successful transition then. I'm very confident that we will count, and we must count every legal vote. We must make sure that any vote that wasn't lawful ought not be counted. That dilutes your vote if it's done improperly. We've got to get that right. When we get it right, we'll get it right. We're in good shape.
It's all going to be fine, folks. That's what Pompeo's saying. I've always thought Pompeo is a very competent member of the administration. He's a smart dude, and he's like everyone, it's fine, all right? There's no crisis here. There is no crisis of transition. The Biden people are just whining and making all this stuff up. Oh, he's not going to leave. What, is Trump supposed to have already left? Is that the answer? Is that what we're being told? Is Trump supposed to have already decided that he's going to just give up? Well, if you listen to John Brennan, sure. 25th Amendment. They got to remove him. We'll talk about that. It's absurd. But then Pompeo did something that you're never allowed to do as a Trump supporter. Never. He made a joke. Play 7.
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes. When the process is complete, there'll be electors selected. There's a process. The Constitution lays it out pretty clearly. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department is functional today, successful today, and successful with the president who's in office on January 20th, a minute afternoon, will also be successful. I went through a transition on the front, and I've been on the other side of this. I'm very confident that we will do all the things that are necessary to make sure that the government, the United States government, will continue to perform its national security function as we go forward.
And yet, panic. Panic. And oh my gosh, he said there'll be another Trump administration. The Secretary of State is part of the coup. It's not a coup. We know what a coup is. That's what you guys on the left tried to do with the Russia collusion lie. That's a coup. Use deep state operatives to fabricate stuff for FISA warrants and then, lie about evidence and then lie about being so dumb you couldn't see the dossier was fake. That's a coup. This is the process as it is. Libs, they just need, forget about mass vaccine doses for a second, although that'll be great when that happens. Libs need mass Xanax doses. Just chill out. Okay, team, since we're still looking into fraud in multiple elections across the country, there are very real legal challenges making their way through the courts, and there are a whole lot of sworn affidavits piling up from people saying that there has been at least widespread irregularities, if not widespread intentional voter fraud. Let's jump into this with our friend Jack Posobiec, also known as Poso to his friends. He is a correspondent for One America News Network. Poso, good to have you, sir.
Hey, Buck, great to be here, man.
What do we know now as of Wednesday, November 11th? Where are we in establishing that in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, there were clear irregularities and or actual intentional fraud? What have we seen? Tell us what you know.
Well, I think the two big lines of this are, as you just stated, we do have the affidavits that are out there, hundreds of affidavits in some of these cases from Nevada to Michigan to Wisconsin to Pennsylvania, all of which deal with irregularities, and specifically in the city of Philadelphia, where I was on election day and thereafter, the specific prevention of meaningful election observers both inside the polls and inside the canvass center. Now, the canvass center, that's what it's called. That's the official term for where the ballots are being counted. So when you hear someone say canvass these days, what it means is the actual counting of the ballots. So the canvass center, election observers were at first prevented from actually being within eyesight of the ballots, right? They were forced to stand behind a low fence that was set up, and they were almost 100 feet away from these ballots. They had to bring out binoculars at one point. That's clearly in contrivance with the spirit of the law. And of course, we've seen the media saying, well, they were in the room. Yeah, they're in the room. They're all the way in the back of the room where they couldn't see anything. And then secondly, even after they got a court order, they were also barred from getting in. Just yesterday, when a few people showed up to even observe the ballots, observe the canvass situation going on in the convention center in Pennsylvania and Philly, they found a list, and then one poll worker actually, kind of surreptitiously took a photo of this list. So the way it works is when you go in, there's a credentialing table. So on the credentialing table, they saw a list, and it was upside down. They took a photo of it real quick out of their pocket that had all Republican names on it of people that said, do not admit, no entry. And this person's name was on it. I haven't been given clearance to say their name, but it is one of the names on the list. So I guess you could figure that out by elimination. One of them was even Corey Lewandowski, the former campaign manager of President Trump, that were not to be allowed in. And of course, having independent, or as we could even say, opposition election observers is very part and parcel in terms of the election code in just about every state in the country. So that's all one track of things, right? The other track is going through and auditing these ballots. Now, in so many of these states where there are discrepancies, we know that there have been cases where people were mailed duplicate ballots. My own brother in Philadelphia was mailed 2 ballots. Now, he's an honest guy, so he brought them in and he turned them both over. But I don't know that everybody in the city of Philadelphia did that. You know what I'm saying? Then we also see numbers where people have cross-referenced the mail-in ballot information, which of course is public, with the national change of address form. So people who may have filed a change of address form moved to a different state and yet then somehow also requested an absentee ballot for the state that they were previously residing in. Now, some states allow this, some states don't. That's going to be a process that they have to go through. And the Trump campaign, the Republican Party, will have to make that part of the system that they go after. They have to make it part of their brief when they're talking about whether or not they're going to disqualify these. One of the biggest things so that's one that also gets you into where these issues of whether or not people who have deceased relatives are suddenly seeing that their deceased relatives have gotten up and decided to vote. So all of these things combined, the question then comes down to those margins, those vote margins in the key states. In Arizona, it's under 15,000 margin. In Pennsylvania, it's about 45,000, very similar to the margin that Trump had with Hillary, actually. In Michigan, it's pretty high, but in Wisconsin, it's only about 20,000. So these are the and in Georgia, I think it's about 10,000. So these are the margins that anyone who's going up to talking about disqualifying these ballots, talking about going through them and figuring out which ones were filed lawfully and which ones were filed with problems, that's the challenge ahead for anyone on, shall we say, Team Trump. And one of the things they actually have in their favor right now is the rejection percentage rate. We're now starting to see that in these elections, typically, even when there's mail-in ballots, even in the primary of 2020, a large number of those ballots were rejected. Yet, however, somehow that rate came way, way down when it came to the general election. So they were accepting way more mail-in ballots than they usually do, just in terms of percentage. And I'm not talking about aggregate numbers here. So the question then becomes, is the reason that they were accepting them because they were accepting ones that normally would have been rejected if you were following the proper procedures?
Speaking of Jack Posobiec, he's a correspondent for One America News Network. Jack, what are your expectations in the days ahead about what we may find, and also how this process will play out in states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, where the margin is, for a state of that size, with the millions of votes cast in those different states, the margin is razor thin.
It's a razor thin margin. That's right. And that's why I do think that the Trump campaign has every right and should fight to make sure that these votes are audited. Keep in mind, this is the first time we've ever done a national election with this amount of mail-in ballots before. Mail-in balloting is even prohibited in some other countries in the world because of massive issues. The bipartisan commission from even that Jimmy Carter was on in 2005, came out in opposition to mail-in ballots and the practice of ballot harvesting. And so there's a lot of irregularities with this, and even outside of just actual fraud, right? There are many times where this system, I mean, think about it, Buck, right? When's the any time that you've ever seen the US government on a national scale roll out something for the very first time and it worked perfectly fine right out of the box, right? I mean, we all remember the Obamacare website. We remember anyone who's been in the military or been in the IC, understands that that's just not how it works, right? And so I think it's silly for anyone to say, well, of course, it had to have worked fine. Well, because why? Because we said so, right? No, that's just not a reasonable thing to say. So I do think they should fight for transparency, for openness, for a full audit of everything that's happened. Georgia is moving to a hand count. They're also moving to do an audit. And I think that the American people absolutely deserve that, right? And so that being said, the Trump campaign has a tough road to hoe, right? It's not exactly an easy thing calling for this massive audit, and it's never been done at this scale. Plus, these states, we don't have systems in place. We do not have systems in place to accurately track these ballots. We don't have anything like a federal voter database or any of those types of things. This is very hodgepodge. A lot of this is done in contrivance, really, of the HAVA Act, Help America Vote Act from 2002. And so we just don't have a very good system in the United States for the handling of our elections. We never really have. And you can certainly ask questions as to why that is. But this time, that system is really failing us because we've decided to put so much stress on it in a way that we never have before.
Speaking of Jack Posobiec of One America News Network, Jack, do you think, you're at one of the places that is talked about as part of the expanding conservative voice and footprint in the media, but just in general terms, do you think we're reaching an inflection point here as well with the shift to platforms like Parler and Rumble being a YouTube? I mean, I'm on both of those platforms. I know you're on these different platforms. Do you think that we're finally, as a movement, conservatives and people on the right are finally understanding that this is, in fact, what we have to do if we want to be competitive in the political and cultural landscape going forward?
Well, I think that's right. And actually, it's amazing to me when you look at the numbers, right? We know that 71 million people voted for Donald Trump, right? That's an empiric number that we can look at. This is a guy who was smeared, lied about, impeached on false pretenses, investigated on false pretenses by a mainstream media for probably 5 years straight. So the fact that 71 million people in the United States stepped up and affirmatively said no. They weren't just saying no to Democrats or Joe Biden, but they were also saying no to all of those purveyors of information that has turned out to be false, like the New York Times, like MSNBC, like CNN. And so I do think that there's been this massive turn, and it's an active turn, right? When people decide to turn off MSN and drive towards Parler, towards Rumble, towards all these other outlets, they're doing it because they want something that's more useful for their life, that's delivering more value for them. That's an active, engaged participant, not just in conservatism or Trump support, but in information and what's going on in the world. There's someone who's decided they're sick of being lied to and actually wants to take a stand for themselves to find out what's happening. And so I welcome all of it. I think I just saw a number. There was a letter from the CEO of Parler last night that just came out, John Mates, who I know pretty well. And he said something like their numbers have hit 4 million now on the Parler platform, which I think is massive. I mean, you really can't, if they're at 4 million and they're able to hold that number in terms of active users, you really can't say that they're a small social media company anymore. You just can't. And then with Rumble as well, we just released a new documentary, Antifa movie. It's at antifamovie.com, and we put it on Rumble, we put it on Pure Social, we put BitChute everywhere. It's on, in addition to YouTube and Vimeo. And what's funny is YouTube and Vimeo came after us for, they said, depictions of violence. I was like, yeah, it's an Antifa documentary. Of course there's depictions of violence.
Yeah, but take it up with the Democrats who have no problem with the violence they're doing, right? It's crazy.
Right, we're explaining it. We're fighting it. We're not encouraging it.
Jack, I think this is where we're going. I feel I'm very bullish about conservatism and the role of the Trump mentality in all of this, and I know you're a part of it too, my friend. So thank you so much for joining us here from One American News Network, Jack Posobiec.
Thanks so much, Buck.
There will be no relief among the libs until Trump is run out of town in D.C. They're completely insane. I know we've been talking about how there's this panic among the liberals because Trump's never going to leave, right? No, Trump is just going to, no matter what, continue to be a voice in politics that takes the fight to the other side, that does not back down, that does not beg forgiveness or bend the knee. That's not going to change, but yeah, maybe he goes back to living in the building that he owns in New York City's Midtown and Mar-a-Lago and numerous other properties, right? He'll be just fine. But the deep state is still out there, as you know. And yesterday there was some testimony on Capitol Hill. Well, the remote Capitol Hill testimony for the witnesses, but the senators were there. The Senate Judiciary Committee got together. And it was just a reminder that with all we found out about how the Russia collusion conspiracy was a total farce, it was complete nonsense. With all of that stuff, we still have gotten no real accountability. And in fact, now you're seeing the unhinged, the TDS suffering former senior government officials who are deep staters are making noise. One, because I think they really are crazy enough to believe that Trump is some threat to democracy and like, how will we ever survive and all that stuff. Yeah, that's a part of it, to be sure. But also, there is this belief among the libs. There's this belief that they can get some of these people from the Obama era of government to come back. Right? They want to be back in the game. And that reminds me of John Brennan, a guy who should be considered really disgraced from his government service. But that's not the perception on the left. When you see who the Democrats are considering to bring in and who Biden's considering to bring into his possible administration, names like Susan Rice come up, right? I mean, there's gonna be a whole Obama 3 or I guess 2.0 could have been the second term. So Obama 3.0 or third term of Obama will be some of the mentality here. And that's why you have John Brennan. I don't think he's done. I think he'd be happy to come back in some capacity, even just as a senior White House advisor again, talking about how they should. You got to make a lot of noise to be heard among the crazy libs these days. I mean, you have crazy Keith Olbermann running around saying that Tucker Carlson should be arrested. I mean, you have just lunatics all over the left. That's very common. And John Brennan is out there saying some pretty crazy stuff in order to get noticed right now. Here he is, play 23.
Well, if Vice President Pence and the cabinet had an ounce of fortitude and spine and patriotism, I think they would seriously consider invoking the 25th Amendment and pushing Donald Trump out, because he is just very unpredictable now. He's like a cornered tiger, and he is going to lash out. And the fact that, again, that he has the powers of the presidency in his hands is quite worrisome. Now, we know that the Attorney General Barr has done Donald Trump's bidding in the past. Will he continue to do that vis-a-vis this election? I don't know. But I do think it's something that the members of Congress, the leadership of the Republican Party, really needs to send clear signals to Donald Trump that if he continues to go along this path, they are going to put up roadblocks.
What path? The bringing legitimate legal challenges in court path? You know, Democrats built a whole resistance strategy for 4 years of suing the president all the time. Sue him, impeach him, sue him, special counsel, sue him. I mean, this is what they did for 4 years. They act like we don't remember any of this. But this is the former CIA director. I worked at the CIA. This guy could have been my boss at one point. He wasn't, thank God. But not that the CIA directors I had were much better. Panetta's better than Brennan, I'll say that. Panetta, he's a Democrat, but he's a Democrat who isn't completely out of his mind. Brennan thinks they should think about that. You're going to remove the president right now with the 25th Amendment? He's saying this on TV. He thinks that's an intelligent thing to say. Stunning, isn't it? This is what Trump derangement syndrome does to people, though.